What triggers an avoidant to obsess over you in silence? Let's get one thing straight. Avoidance isn't indifference. It's fear dressed up as distance. You think they don't care? You think they've moved on? No, they're battling a war inside that you'll never see unless you know where to look. Avoidants don't chase, they retreat. But don't let that fool you, because when the right triggers are hit, when someone touches the right wound at the right depth, they begin to obsess quietly, relentlessly, and no one knows except them. What are those triggers? It's not neediness. It's not drama. It's not you chasing. It's the paradox of someone who sees them, doesn't need them, and doesn't wait around. It's the emotional high of connection followed by the sting of distance. It's when they feel something they don't understand and can't control, they start replaying conversations, stalking your stories, remembering your scent, rewriting the narrative, obsessing, but not reaching out. Why? Because vulnerability to them is exposure, and exposure feels like death. But here's the twist. The obsession isn't about you. It's about what you represent. A key to a part of themselves they've locked away. You didn't just walk into their life. You threatened their armor. And if you're smart, you won't try to fix them. You won't wait. You'll rise. Because when you become the thing they can't possess, you become the thing they can't forget. So stop trying to be seen. Be so grounded in your self-worth that their silence becomes your freedom. Avoidants don't ignore you because they don't care. They ignore you because caring terrifies them. And deep down, most people don't realize that what they interpret as indifference is actually a deep-rooted emotional defense system. When you trigger an avoidance attachment system, it's not just a reaction. It's a shutdown. You didn't say the wrong thing. You didn't do too much. You didn't love too hard. You simply touched a part of them they've spent their whole life trying to hide. See, avoidants have been trained through pain, through betrayal, through emotional neglect, to associate closeness with danger. Somewhere in their past, love didn't feel safe. Maybe it was a parent who was unpredictable. Maybe it was a relationship where their needs were punished. Maybe it was just subtle enough that no one ever saw the damage, but they felt it. And that feeling embedded itself deep into their nervous system. So what do? They build walls, but not obvious ones. These are elegant, invisible, quiet walls. Grafted through silence, detachment, independence. They become masters of being unbothered, or so it seems, but inside they are constantly managing anxiety, trying to stay far enough away from emotional intimacy that they won't be hurt, yet close enough to still feel a connection. It's a tight rope, and they live on it. Now, here's the twist. When someone comes into their life and truly sees them, not just the curated version they present, but the truth underneath, that's when the alarm bells go off. Because being seen is a beautiful thing for most of us, but for an avoidant, it's vulnerability, it's exposure, it's risk. And their first instinct? Run, pull back, go silent. They ghost, they distract themselves, they act like nothing happened, but inside, something absolutely happened. A part of them started to feel, and when they feel, the battle begins. They start obsessing, not because you're constantly messaging them, not because you're proving your worth, but because you felt safe and they still walked away. That contradiction haunts them. They replay the moments. They analyze your words. They scroll through your social media. They wonder what you're doing and why you're not chasing. And every time they think about you, they feel a strange combination of longing and fear. And yet they don't reach out, because reaching out means stepping back into the fire. Understand this. When you trigger an avoidant emotionally, you're not just showing them something new. You're opening an old wound. And that's why it's so intense for them. You're not the first person who made them feel something, but maybe you're the first person who made them feel safe. While doing it, that kind of emotional safety is intoxicating and terrifying, because if they let it in, they also risk it being taken away. They've learned to survive by not needing anyone, by being their own emotional island. But you represented the opposite. You didn't demand, you didn't beg, you just saw them. And that kind of presence, that calm, unshakable energy, that messes with their system. Now they're obsessing silently. Why? Because their nervous system won't allow them to come closer, but their soul doesn't want to let go. They crave closeness, but not at the expense of control. They want to be seen, but only on their terms. So they keep you in their mind, in their heart, in their phone, but not in their life. And the paradox is this: the more you respect yourself, the more you trigger their obsession. The more you stand in your value, the more you challenge their fear. And that challenge is what sticks with them, because you didn't just enter their life, you interrupted their pattern. That's why they don't ignore you out of apathy. They ignore you out of fear. Fear that you might matter too much. Fear that you might see too deep. Fear that you might awaken something they spent years trying to bury. And the truth is, you did. Obsession isn't born in presence, it's born in absence, especially for someone with an avoidant attachment style. When you're right in front of them, available, consistent, offering connection, they might seem cool, detached, even uninterested. But the moment you step back, The moment your energy shifts away from them, something ignites in their nervous system. The silence becomes loud. The absence becomes a trigger. And suddenly you're not just a person. They start to feel your weight in their world. This isn't about playing games or manipulating emotions. This is about understanding the wiring of the avoidant mind. See, when you're present and emotionally open, an avoidant feels pressure, not because of who you are, but because of what that presence symbolizes. Expectation, closeness, vulnerability. These are the very things they've learned to keep at arm's length. So they minimize it. They push it away, not because they don't feel something, but because they do, and feeling something deeply makes them feel powerless. But then you pull back. Maybe you stop texting first. Maybe you stop showing up emotionally. Maybe you just got tired of being the only one making an effort. Whatever it was, your energy changed, and they feel that shift, even if they never admit it. That's the moment the obsession starts to form, because now they're no longer in control of the connection. They can't predict you. You're no longer feeding them safety, consistency, reassurance. You've become a mystery, and the avoidant brain is addicted to mystery. Suddenly they're scrolling through your feed at midnight, watching your stories, replaying your laughter in their mind, wondering what you're doing, who you're with, why you're no longer trying, and they'll never tell you. They'll never show it, but they'll feel it deeply and silently. You see, obsession for an avoidant is not about emotional closeness. It's about distance with meaning. When you're gone, but your energy still lingers, they start building a version of you in their mind that grows stronger with time. They project their unresolved feelings onto that absence. They romanticize it. They imagine conversations. They craft a narrative, and it consumes them, not because you're actively giving, but because you're actively not. It's the unpredictability that gets them. The contrast between the emotional connection they once felt and the current emptiness creates tension inside them. And that tension doesn't resolve itself. It festers, it grows, it loops. They tell themselves they're fine, that they're independent, that they don't need anyone, but deep down the silence echoes. And here's the paradox. The avoidant doesn't fall for people who chase them. They fall for the ones who know when to leave, who know when to stop overgiving, who aren't afraid of losing them. Because that absence creates space for the avoidant to feel their own internal conflict. And in that space, obsession grows, not just with the person, but with the feeling the person created. They start thinking things like, why did they pull away? Did they mess it up? Are they over me? Did they find someone else? And the more questions they ask without answers, the stronger the obsession becomes. Because avoidants don't seek closure, they sit in uncertainty. And uncertainty is fertile ground for fixation. What they fear the most is someone who no longer needs them, someone who could see them fully and still walk away. Because for them, love isn't about being overwhelmed with attention. It's about being impacted without being controlled. When your absence affects them more than your presence ever did, that's when they start to spiral. And the tragedy is they won't always come back. They won't always admit what they feel, because action requires vulnerability, and vulnerability feels like exposure. But make no mistake, the obsession is real. The thoughts are relentless. The feelings are buried but alive, and they relive the moments not because they're sentimental, but because it's the only place where they still feel connected to you, even if only in their mind. So when someone asks, why are they obsessed with me now that I'm gone? The answer is simple. Your absence gave them what your presence never could. A mirror, a trigger, a void they can't unfeel. The more you chase, the safer they feel. And the safer they feel, the less they actually need to face anything real. That's the trap. When you chase someone with an avoidant attachment style, you feed into the very pattern they rely on to protect themselves from emotional vulnerability. You become predictable. You become the one doing the emotional labor. And ironically, your pursuit gives them permission to disconnect. Why? Because they don't have to do the work. They don't have to examine their emotions. They don't have to face their own fears of intimacy. You're doing all the movement. You're carrying all the weight. And so they feel safe in control, not emotionally invested, just managed. But the moment you stop chasing, something shifts. The script flips. The silence you offer is louder than all the messages you used to send. Suddenly they're not being pursued. Suddenly, the energy that was always flowing toward them is gone. And now there's a vacuum, a space, a gap. And that space becomes dangerous, not for you, but for them. Because now they have to deal with their own mind, their own feelings, their own thoughts about you. And those thoughts are no longer buried under the noise of your attention. Avoidants are not emotionless. Let's kill that myth right here. They feel deeply, but they suppress, they compartmentalize, they keep their emotions in a tight, controlled vault. And chasing them only reinforces the story they've always believed. I don't have to get close to be loved. They can hold you at arm's length, knowing you'll still be there. It's not love to them, it's survival. But when you walk away, when you stop trying to prove your worth, when you lean into your own self-respect and say, I won't chase what doesn't choose me. Now you've become the one thing they can't predict. You've introduced emotional risk. And risk to an avoidant is the beginning of obsession. Now they're wondering, why did you stop? Did you lose interest? Did you meet someone else? Were they never enough? And in those questions, they meet something they've spent their life avoiding, emotional responsibility. They have to look at their own behavior, their own fear, their own walls. And maybe for the first time, they feel the sting of your absence in a way they never felt the comfort of your presence. See, chasing doesn't bring them closer. It gives them space to run further. But when you stop, that's when the emotional tension builds, because now there's nothing left to run from except their own feelings. And those feelings, once suppressed, start bubbling to the surface, not just about you, but about all the moments in their past where they pushed away the very thing they craved. You became familiar. You became constant. You were the one they didn't have to worry about losing. And in that dynamic, you lost your power. But when you removed yourself from that equation, when you stopped showing up, when you stopped overgiving, you created a gap they couldn't ignore. And it's in that gap that obsession grows. They won't show it, they won't say it, but it's there. In the way they check their phone, and the way they scroll your page, and the way they wonder if you're as unaffected as you seem. They miss the safety net you once were, but now they miss it from a place of discomfort, not entitlement. And that discomfort, that's where growth begins. That's where realization starts. Not for everyone. Some avoidants will just run faster. But the ones who feel, the ones who've been pushing love away their whole life, they'll notice when you stop chasing. Because it's not just about missing you. It's about missing who they were when you were around, seen, accepted, cared for, without pressure. That's the irony. When you chase, they hide. When you retreat, they reflect. And in that reflection, they begin to feel. Not because you convinced them, not because you argued, explained, or begged, but because silence has a power that words never will. So if you're wondering why they seem to care more now that you've stopped reaching out, understand this. You didn't lose them. You forced them to face themselves. And that's the beginning of their obsession. Obsession doesn't begin when you give an avoidant more of what they ask for. It begins when you stop giving them what they've come to expect. The moment you match their distance, not from a place of resentment, but from a place of grounded self-respect, you flip a switch inside of them that they don't even know exists. You become unfamiliar, and that unfamiliarity is what gets under their skin. Avoidants crave, they feel safest when they're not being emotionally pursued, when no one is asking them to reveal their deeper layers. They hold on to their independence like a life raft. When you give them space, at first, it feels like a win for them. They breathe easier. They feel in control. They tell themselves they've avoided another entanglement, but then something strange happens. You don't come back. You don't reach out after a few days. You don't send the just checking in message. You don't try to make things smooth again. You give them the very thing they said they wanted, and then you keep it. And now they're left sitting with a space they thought they needed, but it's echoing too loudly. It's too still. It's too quiet. And it's in that silence that obsession begins to take root. Because now, for the first time, they're not reacting to your emotions, they're reacting to their own. They're alone with their thoughts, their feelings, their memories of you. And you're no longer available to absorb their fear or fix their disconnection. You've mirrored their need for space, but you've done it without panic, without begging, without explaining. You've simply withdrawn your energy. And that's what messes with them, because now you are unpredictable. Before, you were constant. You reached out, you showed care, you made them feel seen even when they pretended not to care. But now your silence becomes a mirror. It shows them what it's like to be on the other side of distance. And suddenly they start wondering, what changed? Did I push them too far? Are they really done with me? You see, when you give an avoidant space, but still carry emotional anxiety, they feel it. They know you're still energetically chasing. You're just doing it more quietly. But when you give them space and reclaim your power, when you stop holding your breath and start breathing for yourself again, that's when the game changes. You become emotionally neutral, not cold, not angry, just clear. And clarity is something they've spent their life avoiding. They don't know what to do with someone who doesn't react, who doesn't flinch, who doesn't fight for crumbs. That kind of energy makes them uncomfortable, not because it's aggressive, but because it's unavailable. And avoidants don't obsess over people who are needy. They obsess over people they can't figure out, people who see through the walls and choose to walk away anyway. When you mirror their space with your own power, you stop being someone they can manage. You stop being an emotional safety net. You become someone who commands respect, not through force, but through presence. And that presence stays with them in their head, in their chest. In every moment they go to reach for their phone, and remember, you're no longer on the other end. Now they're the ones checking your profile. Now they're wondering if you've moved on. Now they're thinking about everything they didn't say. And no, they might not tell you. They might not reach out, but that doesn't mean they're not thinking. Obsession doesn't always look like action. Sometimes it looks like silence laced with intensity, thoughts that loop, feelings that linger, fantasies they don't admit to anyone. And the most powerful part, you didn't do anything to them. You just stopped doing things for them. You stopped over-explaining, overreaching, overcompensating. You let them sit in the space they created. And in that space, they realized you weren't just another person. They realized you were different, not because you chased harder, but because you knew when to stop. That's the trigger. That's what starts the silent obsession. When you give them their space, but this time it's on your terms. They don't want someone who needs them. They want someone who sees them, but doesn't need them to feel whole. That's the heart of the paradox with an avoidant. They've been conditioned to believe that love is dangerous, that dependency equals weakness, and that the more someone needs them, the more they are likely to lose themselves in the relationship. So what they crave, what truly drives them wild, is not someone who offers endless validation or constant reassurance, but someone who holds their own while still offering authentic connection. Here's the thing. Avoidance may come across as emotionally unavailable, but deep down they want to be seen. They want someone who can look beyond their guarded exterior and recognize their true self, the person underneath all the walls. But the moment they sense someone needing them too much, their defense mechanisms go up, they pull back, they retreat. Why? Because that need is a reflection of dependency, and dependency to an avoidant feels like a trap. It triggers their deepest fear of being emotionally engulfed and losing their sense of independence. So the key to triggering an avoidant's deepest obsession isn't in chasing them or showing them how much you need them. It's in embodying the strength of your own independence. When they see that you can stand on your own 2 feet, when they see that you don't need them to fill a void, that's when they start to look at you differently. You stop becoming someone they can control or manage. You become someone who can exist without them. And that is a mirror to everything they've always been afraid of but secretly longed for. What the avoidant ultimately wants is someone who isn't afraid to hold their own boundaries, someone who doesn't let them walk all over them emotionally, someone who isn't constantly trying to pull them out of their shell or push them into intimacy they're not ready for. Avoidance needs someone who respects their space but also knows how to engage them in ways that feel safe and unpressured. When you give them space without panicking, without trying to fix the situation, you show them that you don't need them to validate your worth. And that in itself is an incredibly attractive quality to someone who has spent their life keeping others at a distance. You show them that you have a life beyond them, that your emotional well-being doesn't depend on their attention, and that you can remain grounded regardless of their behavior. That's not emotional neglect, it's emotional maturity. And that maturity is the one thing that an avoidant can't resist. You stop being the person they have to manage and you become the person they have to figure out. When you can exist fully in your own energy, independent and self-contained, it triggers a longing in them, a desire to break through that emotional wall. But here's the twist. They won't break through until they feel safe enough to do so. And the only way they'll feel safe enough is if you create an emotional environment where you aren't chasing them, pleading for connection, or bending over backwards for their approval. You're simply being you. Avoidants don't want someone who is constantly dependent on them for emotional support. They don't want someone who is always worried about their mood, seeking validation, or constantly questioning if they care. That behavior suffocates them. Instead, they want someone who can be emotionally available when they are, but doesn't need them in order to feel whole. They want someone who can see them as they are without trying to fix them or get them to open up on demand. The most powerful thing you can do for an avoidant is to not need them. Show them that your worth is not tied to their approval or their affection. Live your life fully without waiting around for them to show up emotionally. And the moment you do that, the moment you stop needing their validation to feel secure in yourself, that's when you tap into the emotional power that draws them in. They'll begin to question themselves, their behavior and their feelings toward you. They'll start wondering, why am I not pursuing this person? Why can't I stop thinking about them? It's not manipulation. It's not a game. It's simply the truth. The more you stop seeking their approval, the more you embody your own self-worth, the more they will start to obsess over you in silence. You've stopped giving them what they've always expected, a person who's emotionally dependent, who would never dare to walk away. You've shown them that you can walk away, that you can live without them. And that, more than anything, is what will make them crave your presence even more. The key here is balance. You don't become emotionally cold. You don't withdraw your love, but you stop needing them. You create space where you can be your own person, separate from their fears, their walls and their emotional avoidance. You stand in your power, and when you do that, you force them to confront everything they've been running from: connection, intimacy, vulnerability. And in that confrontation, they realize that the person they've been avoiding is the one they've actually been longing for all along. Avoidants don't always push away those they care about. They push away what threatens their sense of control. The moment you start making them feel exposed, making them feel like they can't maintain their distance, that's when their fears kick in. They've spent so much of their life building walls around their emotions, creating barriers to shield themselves from hurt, that when someone comes along who's able to break through even a little bit, it feels like a vulnerability they can't handle. The intensity of the avoidance comes from their inability to process those emotions. They don't know how to deal with the closeness that might come with real intimacy. They want connection, but they also don't want to risk the potential of being hurt. When they start obsessing over you, it's often because they've recognized something they've never been able to fully understand or control before: their own emotions. These feelings make them uneasy, so their natural instinct is to withdraw. But withdrawing doesn't erase the feelings. It magnifies them. When an avoidant starts to obsess over you in silence, it's often because they're confronting something they can't push away anymore. The deeper the connection you offer, the stronger the internal conflict becomes. They feel torn between wanting to engage and not knowing how to open up without losing control. The more you're able to stand your ground emotionally, the more they're forced to confront their own internal chaos. What makes this silence so powerful is that it's a self-inflicted battle. The more they distance themselves, the more they realize they can't forget about you. They can't stop thinking about you. They try to convince themselves that they're okay, that they don't need anyone, but deep down they feel the pull. They pull towards the very thing that terrifies them: real emotional connection. And as much as they want to shut it out, that constant mental replay of thoughts, of missed opportunities, of what could have been, becomes their obsession. It's not that they're indifferent to you. They just don't know how to integrate these powerful, conflicting emotions into a healthy relationship. So they retreat. But their mind races, unable to find peace. They obsess, they analyze, and they feel a constant pull towards something they know they can't fully control. In conclusion, when navigating the complex dynamics of an avoidance attachment style, understanding the subtle triggers that fuel their obsession in silence is crucial. The truth is, it's not about chasing. It's about creating space for them to confront their own feelings while you stand firm in your own emotional independence. Avoidants need the room to wrestle with their inner conflict, and when you stop chasing them, you inadvertently trigger a deeper self-reflection. It's through emotional neutrality, boundary setting, and the refusal to settle for anything less than what you deserve that the quiet yet intense obsession begins. Thank you for taking the time to explore this deeper understanding of avoidant behavior with me today. It's a powerful and transformative journey, and I hope this speech has helped illuminate the paths to healthier emotional connections. Remember, your value is not dependent on anyone's approval. Take care, stand strong, and until next time, goodbye.